Thank you for tuning in to Matters of the Heart Radio Live with your host, biblical counselor and author, Ms. Wendy. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart Radio Show. What a joy to get to join you today, wherever you're at. Thank you for taking some time to join me. And my special guests, Roger and Diane Samoff, I just love them. I have known them for quite some time and absolutely love the way that they use their voice to bring awareness to something that's really serious, and that's the topic of domestic violence. I know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I definitely want to help bring awareness wherever I have a platform or a voice to what domestic violence is. You know, sometimes people think domestic violence is only apparent in a black eye or bruises, and that's absolutely not true. Violence and domestic abuse look different. Violence, yes, does look black and blue, but abuse comes in many different ways. It comes in emotional abuse, and we're going to talk about that today and what it looks like, verbal abuse and what that looks like. And I know that this show is going to benefit you and those that you love. Sometimes you may feel like, well, that doesn't quite relate to me. However, I know that you have people in your life that God has brought about on purpose. And there may come a point in time when the stuff you learn here today will come in handy so that you can help someone else. So as we become aware of what domestic violence is and how we can get out of these really dangerous and serious situations, I want you to know that knowledge is power, and making a difference is something that we can all do. Now, I want to welcome Diane and Roger. Welcome to the show. Diane?
Hey, you cut out. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I said
Diane.
welcome
Thank
to the
you.
show.
That's okay. Sorry. This is Diane and Roger, and I certainly appreciate you having us at the show.
Well,
Absolutely,
I'm glad
Wendy.
to have you. Now, Diane, can you tell us some about your story and tell me your experience with domestic violence?
Yes, I sure will, Wendy. You know, I met my ex-husband when I was 16, married him when I was 19, and had 4 of his beautiful children. He did not hit me while we were dating. He was jealous. But, of course, when you're in high school, you think you want your boyfriend to be a little jealous of you or he wouldn't care about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything went pretty good, and then we got married. And on the 3rd day of our marriage, he heard my aunt and she came over to visit, and he heard us laughing. He didn't ask me what we talked about or anything. So later on that afternoon, I lay down, took a nap, and then he woke me up and pushed me all the way into the kitchen and hit me right in the mouth on the 3rd day. I didn't know till later why he did it, and it was because he said we were talking about him. So that went on for 10 years, and as I said, 4 beautiful children, from hiding under cars, pregnant, going without food or anything to eat or drink, no electricity when you're 8 and 9 months pregnant, hiding in vacant apartments because I was apartment manager, you name it, trying to get away from him.
Well,
And so
tell
finally,
me how long that lasted, Diane. How long did you stay with this man before you began to really become aware that, hey, I'm in danger, I need to do something here?
you know, it was 10 years,
Yeah.
10 long years.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would try to talk to me, but of course I loved him and I was going to change him. But ladies and gentlemen, men get hit also.
Yes.
They don't change. I know the good Lord can change them, but a lot of them will not change. And ask me how I left. It is not easy. I will never tell anyone it's easy to do, but it's worth it. But the good Lord just kind of picked me up, moved me from Monroe, Louisiana to Dallas, literally. I don't know how I did it. I was very shy. I wouldn't hardly eat in front of anyone, even other women, men. It didn't matter because I was afraid I'd have too much in my mouth, and I wouldn't talk because I may say the wrong thing. You know, he took away he gave me all these inhibitions of that I couldn't do anything. I was worthless. But when I did leave, I went to work in Dallas with my 4 children and had 2 jobs, supported them. And then about 3 years later, I met Roger Samoff, and we were married within 6 months, and we're still married, 33 years, I believe, 32, 33, and doing great. He adopted all 4 of my children. But like I said, I won't say it was easy. It was not easy at all, but it is worth it. For the first time in years, we had an apartment we didn't have to move out of because of not being able to afford the rent. We had utilities. We even had a phone. We always had food. I had a car, you name it. I rented a post office box for this gentleman to be able to stay in touch with his children because I felt like the kids needed to think or know that he cared about them. And, of course, he never wrote them. He would only call when he was drinking, and he was an alcoholic, and he still is.
And whenever he would hurt you or hit you, was it just when he was drinking, or would he do that when he was sober too?
No. In fact, we went to church one evening, and he was sober. It was a revival. And so I went down front to ask my preacher if he would pray for us. Well, I got up front and turned around, and my husband then was standing right behind me. So I told God real quick, I'm going to have to lie to the preacher because if I ask him to pray for our marriage, my husband's going to beat me. So I said I wanted to rededicate my life.
And that can be a scary thing, right, Diane, when you're trying to reach out for some help and you're really having to watch over your shoulder all of the time because someone who is abusive is also very controlling, and they want to monitor and watch your every move and your every word.
Absolutely. That night after we got home, he supposedly wanted to be baptized, accept Christ. So we get home, everybody's happy, I put on my robe and my gown, and all of a sudden he proceeds to slap me, push me, ripped my robe off of my body, and said I only went up front to get closer to the preacher.
So he was accusing you of doing that, to go to the front to get closer to the preacher. Yeah. In an inappropriate way, in other words. He was insinuating that it was in an inappropriate way.
Right, that I was flirting with the preacher, right, because I went down front. And then one time we were walking down a little shopping center outside on the sidewalk, and I happened to look up. My mother used to threaten to buy me blinders like a mule, so he couldn't threaten me. But I happened to look up, and there was a man there, and of course I immediately put my head down. He busted my nose right there on the sidewalk, and he was sober then.
My goodness.
So, and a lot of people say, mental is worse than physical. And I agree. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from that. But people don't understand. When you get physical, they don't just stand there and hit you. They're talking to you, too. So you get both whammy.
I can only imagine how hard that had to be, because even when you were looking for a safe place, within the church to try to let someone know that something was going on, even in just asking prayer, even that was blocked off from you, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was. And, abuse, like you said earlier, it's not prejudiced. It's black, it's white, old, young, rich, poor, young, old, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's completely across. And like you said, it's mental, it's emotional, it's physical. It's even, only word I can think right now, I'm sorry, money, because they'll hold money away from you.
Yes.
Right.
They will.
It
And
can even be sexual.
yes, absolutely, because both people need to want to be sexually engaged in a marriage. And, sometimes people think, well, just because they're married, that one person has rights over the other person's body, even if the other person doesn't want to engage sexually. And that's absolutely wrong.
Correct.
Rape does happen in marriage.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Roger, when you hear these stories that Diane shares, and I know that you've heard them and I've met them, I've met you. You're such a kind and gentle man. Does it still hurt when you hear her tell these stories? You love her and you love these 4 children that you've adopted, and I know that they're grown and y'all are grandparents now. But when you hear her tell these stories, and do you imagine it in your mind? How does it make you feel when you hear her tell these stories again about the abuse that she went through at the hands of her ex-husband?
Well, it's interesting because the way I've expressed it to most people is that while I didn't understand it or have a deep appreciation for it, after now almost 33 years of marriage, I have lived through Diane's recovery. And so, when you begin to see, if you look at someone who's been injured, and has scars, you can see those are physical. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with someone who's lived through abuse and survived it, you can't see the scars, but you do see them come out. And there have been things that have played back in Diane's reaction to me over certain things, where she was playing back an old tape. You've heard me say that before.
Mm-hmm.
It's gee, I've been in this situation. This feels like what happened before, and all of a sudden
Roger? Uh-oh, I think we lost Roger.
That's one of the things that women like Diane really deal with, is they have to begin to see the world differently, versus, are all men going to be like this?
Can you repeat the last part of that again for me, Roger? I think I lost you for a second there. So the playbacks, the tapes, explain that to me one more time.
Well, and let me know if you have any other problem. I'll see if I can change the dynamics of the phone here. But I think the experience here of Diane's playing back really old feelings, situations that had happened before that weren't relevant to the conversation we were having, but to her they were becoming very real. Mm-hmm. She would become anxious or agitated or upset, and it didn't make any sense. So I think one of the things is someone who's whether man or woman is dealing with someone who's come out of that situation, the first thing you have to do is you have to have patience.
Yes.
Is you have to, shut up, listen, and instead of engaging as though you're playing a tennis match here in a conversation, just be silent for a minute and try to figure out what's going on and express an interest and an affection and concern for her well-being. Mm-hmm. I think it continually hurts. I guess in response directly to your question, it's very painful. A few years ago, a friend helped, who was there when Diane was going through this, helped Diane actually write a short couple of pages of occurrences of things that had taken place. And when I read them for the first time, I honestly couldn't get through them. They were too painful. They were, I couldn't imagine anyone ever being that afraid. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's something you continue to live with. It's not something that a woman who's suffered significant abuse over time is going to have it go away, because it's still sometimes wakes her up with a nightmare at night. Some 30 plus years later.
Right, because there are triggers that come about that do remind you of the pain that you went through when you were in that abusive situation.
Right.
Diane, whenever these things were happening, how old were your children, and was he hurting you when you were pregnant?
Yes, both. Um, I mean, like I said, it started on the third day. I have 4 children. And one night, example, my oldest was, I think, 9, I believe, and my youngest was in my lap. He was still an infant. Well, no, he was walking. And I was sitting in a rocking chair in the den watching TV with the children, and all of a sudden the front door opened, and it's him. So he comes walking in. He comes in the den, and he stoops down in the chair beside me on the floor. And while he stooped down, I realized you learn to just know their habits. So his jaw was twitching, and I knew something was going to happen, but I had no idea what. All of a sudden, he flips me and the baby over in the chair, starts calling me the B word, pushes me up against the wall. The baby's lips obviously bleeding because the chair hit his little mouth, and he pushes me in the corner and tells me that I was for doing it. And I'm thinking, what did I do? And I said, please let me touch the baby. Let me get the baby. And he said, no, look what you did to him. So, yes, they saw it. There was a time when I had an infant in my hands, and he beat me so bad. He pulled the gown off of me, ripped it off one shoulder. Blood was on the wall and on the baby, and I was completely out of my head. My parents lived right down the street, but instead of going to their house to ask for help, I went way down the street to the bus barn and got help and got the police, and we went back and got the baby because, anyway, right in the middle of him hitting me, and I know, again, this was God helping me, he decided he wanted cigarettes, and he wanted me to go to the store right in the middle of beating me. So that was the good Lord. I gave, to him for getting me out of that night, and that's why I left the baby with him to pretend to go get the cigarettes and then come back and get him with the police.
Is that when you left?
I'm sorry?
Is that when you left?
No, it still went on. That was my oldest child, and it went on. But like I said, when I finally left, it was not, I know we're on a Christian radio, and I don't want anyone to think I'm just saying this just to let it run out of my mouth. I really mean the good Lord just picked me up and moved me. You have no idea who I was back then. I was so shy. I don't know how I moved to Dallas. I just moved and got the job and then saved some money. And my parents kept my children while I was saving money and went back and got them and moved them to Dallas with me. I hate to say it this way, but it's almost the truth. Women of abuse, be it any type, we're almost like an alcoholic. You can tell us and tell us and tell us, but until we're ready, we're not going to leave. Some women aren't lucky. They leave in a box. The family, I've had lots of mothers and sisters and cousins call me from time to time and say, Diane, please tell me what to say to her to get her to leave. You have to love us. You have to love us. My parents would get so angry with me. They would say, oh, don't call me again, but of course I would, and they'd come get me. You have to be there when we're finally finished to lift us up and help us. That's about all I can tell mothers and family.
And it really can be a challenge a deep challenge. I think sometimes when people listen to a story like this from the outside, they think, oh no, the first time someone would have done that to me, I would have been out of there. But it's not always that easy. And that's why you find people staying in long-term relationships, even though they are abusive. Sometimes it may be because they don't have much of an education and they don't know how they will feed or take care of themselves or their children. Sometimes they're threatened, that if you leave, I'm going to kill myself or you or the children. And they've been abused enough that they know, hey, this person really has the potential to do this. And it can cause them to stay in a situation that is absolutely detrimental, way longer than they need to. But I think oftentimes when you hear a story, if it's not happening to you, it's easy to say, oh, well, I would quickly get out of that situation, or I would take a frying pan to them. We've heard that said oftentimes, but it's just not that easy, is it?
Absolutely not. You don't know how many times I heard the same thing. Just wait till he's asleep and put Vaseline on him, wrap him in a sheet and hit him. But they don't always fall asleep. Mine didn't. He would wake up in the middle of the night hitting me, So you have no idea. And you're right. It's not easy. People think, why don't you leave? Okay, who's going to keep my kids while I interview? Where am I going to get the clothes to go interview? Where am I even going to get the car or the gas? And then if I get the job, where am I going to live? How am I going to pay their lunches? How am I going to buy their school clothes? How am I going to this, that, and the other? I'll tell you another thing that maybe I shouldn't say on air, but if it was today, I'd probably get CPS called on me because I had 4 children. And so later on, when I finally divorced him, 3 of them were in school. 1 of them was in daycare. Well, I worked downtown Dallas. The daycare was out in Euless, so that was a long haul. I was late one day, and they threatened to charge me $5 a minute for being late. Well, I never got a penny child support or anything of help. So I had to get I think Chris was 11. I don't want to lie here on the station. But anyway, he would have to get out of school, get the other 2 from school, walk to the daycare, and walk them all home. Now, it was just a few blocks, but still, in today's world. But I had to do that. I couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's those type...
Go ahead.
Good. It's those type scenarios that leave someone feeling overwhelmed and that they just can't do it. They just can't get out. But the truth is that God will be with you. And when you need to get out, you need to get out.
Yes. And believe me, he will be with you.
Let's take a quick commercial break and then we'll pick right back up.
Are you suffering from a past hurt? Lingering pains can inhibit your potential to be all that God has in store for you in your life. As a biblical counselor, Miss Wendy has written Healing Waters, a 21-day workbook which offers well-thought-out steps to emotional recovery. Making use of hands-on activities, prayers, and meditation on Scripture, Miss Wendy helps build faith and develop patterns that establish lifelong vitality. Why not take that step to the healthy, whole, God-filled individual you're meant to be? Go to mattersoftheheartradio.org to order your copy today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org.
Well, Diane, I am so glad that you're here with me on the show. It takes courage to talk about where you've been in life and when you were the one that was being hit. Tell me what got you to the point that you said, okay, I'm leaving, I'm out of here.
My children saved my life on several occasions. Back years ago, I know this may sound small, but I used to smoke cigarettes. And, it got to a point one time where I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I literally would not remember my children's names. So I prayed to God, and I said, you know what? I don't know what to give you. I don't have much, but I tell you what, I'll give up smoking if you'll just let me remember my children's names. And I would go to their bedrooms and say their names because the physical and mental abuse is so bad. You just think you're losing it. You start having anxiety attacks. You literally think you're dying. And, you finally just get enough. And one day I just decided that was it, and the good Lord was going to help me and get me out of all of this. But back to the cigarettes, I'm sorry. As you can tell, I still get nervous talking about all of it. My insides still shake, even though it's been 30-something years.
Yes.
But I did give up the cigarettes, everyone, never touched them again, and never even had an urge. So I praise the Lord for that. But, my main thing to people is, number one, don't do it. Don't take it. And please don't suffer in silence. Even though you're not going to leave today, tomorrow, the next week, please reach out to someone that you can trust. But be very careful, too, because they don't want you telling people about what they do. Because he was the life of the party. People loved him. You know.
And that makes it hard, doesn't it? When the person who's abusing you is liked by others, because you feel a little crazy sometimes, if I can say that, because you know how much the other person is liked, and it kind of feeds into that insecurity that they will be believed, you will not, and it just feeds the problem.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things, Wendy, and I think you know this, is that so many of the abusers are exactly that. You don't see them as abusers. Outsiders see them as entertaining, friendly, social, and would never think that this person was capable of abuse unless they had actually caught them in a bad moment. So when you have friends, you begin to see signs of things that are going on with them, things where they're losing weight, they're concerned, you don't hear from them, because one of the things that an abuser will do is it's really all about control.
Right.
Diane's ex wanted control, and so all of a sudden you find you don't have any friends that aren't his friends, and
right.
if you try to leave to go to some social event or go to your parents or something else, all of a sudden he picks that moment to kind of turn life upside down. So it's just an unfortunate situation that many women get trapped in, and somehow either never escape that, or they escape that situation and go into a relationship with another individual who treats them the same way or worse.
Right. And the name of the game is isolation, because then you're more vulnerable, you're more susceptible to their messages, and it kind of takes you away from that option of having help. And, in the time that we live in, a lot of people would think that, oh, that's kind of silly because they may have a job or something like that. But the fear is on the inside, and the fear and the control happens even when you're not in that person's presence. They have managed to put their hands invisibly around your mind and your emotions, and you will be afraid, even if you are surrounded by people, to talk about what's happening. And most of the time, children are in the picture, and what do you love more than your children? Nothing. So you're willing to go through all kinds of hell, if I can say that. It's my show, so I can say that.
Right.
You end up going through all kinds of hell because you don't want to lose your babies, and you love them more than anything. And a crazy cycle begins to happen, and you're more and more isolated. You find yourself making excuses for the other person, even to the children, and before you know it, you find yourself in a really difficult circumstance that you never would have wanted to be in.
Exactly, Wendy.
Yeah. So I want to know about, when did you pack your bags? What happened? When was enough for you, Diane?
It all just came together. Just one day, I guess I just woke up and decided this is it. And like I said, moved from Monroe, Louisiana to Dallas, Texas. The only job I had ever had before is work for my daddy in a small iron business. And I went from that to all of a sudden taking 4 children to Dallas, and went to work for U.S. Tel, which is now Sprint. Went to work in their cleaning department. Now, talking about education, all I have is high school. So, again, the good Lord opened that door, and boom, I was there. So I don't think it happens that easy for every woman. A lot of women don't get the doors open so quickly. I don't know what to say, Wendy. It literally happened that way. The good Lord just opened the doors for me.
How? Did you apply for a job and you were immediately accepted?
Yes. And yes, they hired me, and I couldn't believe it. And I went back, got some clothes that I had, and borrowed some from some people because I didn't have much, and went to work and saved up money and went back to Louisiana and got my children.
Mm-hmm.
My parents kept them for me.
How long were you away from them, Diane?
Probably around 2, almost probably 3 months, trying to save the money to get an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Which
were
I
you
had
going
never
to say
had on my
something,
own
Roger?
before.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I think what, is Diane used to tell the story. She said, to be honest, the good Lord did it because one day I was in Monroe, Louisiana, and the next day I was in Dallas, Texas, and I had no idea how I got here. And as she says, she borrowed a used suit and a pair of red high heels for an interview, and it was with back then it was U.S. Tel, which eventually became the Sprint Corporation, and she went for an interview, and she said those shoes made her feel like she was someone for the first time in many, many years, and it must have shown on her face because she went to the interview. It was the only interview she had, and she got the job, and that just never happens. And, from that, I think is one of the things that inspired her as she began to look at helping others in formulating an identity around society of women who love shoes. Certainly all women love shoes, but for Diane, it's a much deeper story.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I love it too. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I said I knew if you just had something and you said, let's come talk about abuse, a lot of the women that attend our events have been in abuse and they're out or they're still in it. And a lot of them still are not ready to share their story. They still don't want people to know. And I understand that because it is embarrassing because people label women that are abused. You have to be poor, you have to be uneducated. And that is so not true. Either wealthy men or they're wealthy. And, of course, they don't want other people to know it, so they don't want to leave him. And, it happens to all people. Right.
It does. And those shoes were really significant for you, weren't they?
Yes. That's how we came about, like Roger said, Society of Women Who Love Shoes is when you do that and you say you're going to have a shoe contest, you draw more people. And that's what it was all about, is to get awareness out. So we always started the events with me telling a little bit about my story or sharing about someone we were helping, obviously no name or anything, details, and taking donations to these families.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now you left, you established yourself, and then some wonderful man by the name of Roger comes about. How did that happen?
Well, I was living in Arlington, and some friends of mine called me and asked me to come out to a place called September's at the Hilton in Arlington. Mm-hmm. And I went, and Roger was there with some other gentlemen that he works with, and we met there and just fell head over heels. And like I said, within 6 months, we were married, and people thought, oh, Lord, this is not going to work. He had people tell him, oh, Lord, this woman's got 4 children. Is she sick? What's going on? And we've been married ever since. I mean, I'm sure he's perfect, so we don't have many problems. We have our ups and downs like everyone, but we keep going and through it.
Mm-hmm. Diane, how would you encourage anyone who is in a difficult situation right now and they're saying, but if I do this, I may not see my children for 2 or 3 months until I get on my feet, and that scares me. I don't want to live one day without them. How would you encourage them?
You could go without them for 3 months. 2 months, whatever it may be, or you can let them continue living in what they're living in, or worse, you may not make it out, and then they may have to live with you for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Live without, yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
I mean, it sounds harsh. All I can do is tell you there is help out there. Your family, if your family won't help you, maybe a friend will. Call me, email me. We will get you clothes. We've even helped women get a bicycle. We've helped them get a car. We've helped several women get their teeth completely done because of being hit in the mouth. You know, we help with your children's school clothes. We're a small charity, so we don't always have cash to give you, but we can sure get on that Facebook and email and beg for donations on your behalf. You don't have to do it.
Oh, yes. You know, that's what I love about what you're doing. Now, I want to offer that resource as well. Diane, tell our listeners, how can they get a hold of you? If they need help, you said you're willing to help. What's your website? Give us some tools here for how we can reach you.
It is Society of Women Who Love Shoes.org.
Okay, that's the Society of Women Who Love Shoes.org. Now, if anyone knows me personally, they're going to know that I love heels too. And I love red heels, as a matter of fact. I've got quite a few of them. I just really love them. And abuse is really near and dear to my heart. And something I want to encourage people with is if you grew up in an abusive home, you tend to learn behavior patterns that are actually detrimental in your married life as an adult if you've married someone who's abusive, because you learned early on in life how to cover up for someone who's abusive. You learned how to keep your mouth shut. You learned how to hide the scars. You learn these things, and you gain a certain amount of tolerance for your adult life. And it may seem like a small thing at first. Well, it was just a slap. I mean, I don't have any black eyes. He didn't pull a gun on me. He didn't kick me. But a slap is a slap, and a slap is not okay. You are valuable to Christ, and He didn't purchase you so that someone else could abuse you. He didn't ransom your life so that someone else could take your life. He ransomed you because you're valuable, and He loves you, and He wants us, each one of us, male or female, to be able to trust in Him and His love and to be secure in that, so that we have the courage to do what we need to do to live the life that He's called us to live. If our identity is wrapped in what someone else says, in the power that they have in our life, and it's not in the Lord, we're out of balance and we're in a danger zone. I want you to know that God doesn't have to have you remain with someone in order to be good to you. God's covenant with you and His promises to you are exactly that. They are to you, not to you contingent upon whether or not you stay married to a particular person or in friendship or a dating relationship with someone. Abuse is not okay. It is not okay for someone to shame you with their words and to constantly put you down. It's not okay for them to belittle you and call you names. It's not okay for them to play mind games with you so that you're wondering, when will it really get out of hand? To make you doubt your worth so that you feel absolutely insignificant or insecure unless you have their green light. The only green light you really need is the green light that comes from heaven. If they're badgering you all of the time, this is not okay, or insulting you and cussing you out. You are valuable. I'm not going to be able to say that enough times in this show. You are valuable. You know, Diane, this is part of my story as well, and it's not something that is necessarily fun or easy to share, and I agree with you on that. You know, I've shared my story with you before, and I have 4 children as well, and was married to a minister and spent almost 20 years of my life with this man, and I love this man. I think part of my heart will love the good side that I saw of this man. But the abusive side was not good, and being brought up in an abusive home only enabled me to excuse the behavior way longer than I should have. And just because someone's a Christian doesn't mean that they're going to do everything right. We know that. We all fail. But just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we're exempt from being abused. And by all means, it does not mean that because we're Christians, we're meant to stay in an abusive relationship. We are smart. We have been given a mind, and we have been given a will, and we have been given a voice, and God intends us to use these things. We don't become Christians and all of a sudden we're ignorant and without a voice and without common sense, and most definitely without courage. God has a remarkable way of downloading courage in us. It's important that when the courage rises, that we learn to ride that and to use it and to take it and run with it, because it seems to come in waves when you're in an abusive relationship. And when it comes, I want to encourage all of our listeners, when that courage rises up, it's time to go. It's important that you have a plan. Begin reaching out to people who are trustworthy, who you know will not leak a word to your mate as to your whereabouts when you need to leave. Have an emergency bag put aside somewhere completely different, maybe with a family or a relative member who knows what's going on, or a friend that gives you a day or two worth of clothes should you need it and should you have to go in the middle of the night, so that you're not just left with your pajamas. Make it to where your children will have clothes as well. Over time, if you can, begin putting some money aside so that you have money for a hotel stay for a night until you can call whoever you need to call for help, or to get a taxi ride. We can begin to put things in place, even we don't have the courage yet, so that when the time presents itself and we're ready to go, then we're really ready to go. What else would you add to that, Diane? Did I lose you? Diane?
Yes. Okay, you cut out for a minute.
Okay. What else would you
were so
add
right,
to that?
Wendy. Well, one thing I wanted to make a comment. You were so right about that, Wendy, that, I was worried. You're once married, always married. You said you would, till death do us part. You even had people telling you, well, if you're a Christian, you need to try to make this work no matter what, unless he runs around and has sex with someone,
Mm-hmm.
But, like you said, I went to my preacher several times, but I went to him, and he told me the very same thing. He said, Diane, the good Lord did not put you here to let some man or whomever abuse you and physically hit you like that. So that kind of helped give me the courage to leave also, because like you said, a lot of people think they shouldn't leave unless he, commits the sexual act against you, adultery.
Right. And so, that is not true. In Psalms 11, verse 5, it tells us that God hates violence. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 13, it says that God judges those who are violent. Ezekiel 8:17 says God is angry with violent behavior. Ezekiel 45:9, God commands those who are violent to change. Psalm 7:9, God calls us to help bring an end to violence. It is important that we understand that God does not excuse this behavior. Jesus didn't even stand around before it was his appointed time to give his life as a sacrifice, when those that were violent and angry and jealous and vengeful or angry towards him, he didn't just sit there and say, okay, do whatever you want to. He would leave. He was leaving towns. He was leaving villages, because he wasn't going to entertain that. When Saul pursued David, God didn't expect David to just sit there and take it. No, David ran, and God hid David. And it's important to understand that God has a way of making a way if you will trust him. It can be one of the scariest things of your life, but God will not fail you. He never has, and he never will. We may fail ourselves with poor decisions. Someone else may fail us because of their poor decisions, but God's not going to drop us or let us go. And if the worst thing in the world is having a short time of financial difficulty and trying to get back on your feet, that pales in comparison to the years of peace and strength and happiness that you'll gain from a small time of making a sacrifice. I know in another time that I interviewed you, Diane, we talked about having some financial struggles when you were with your children, and y'all were eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And those are some of the best times that y'all can remember, right?
Oh, yes. I remember the time we went out in the backyard and had a picnic with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You know, it's funny now. It wasn't funny then. But my cousin, little girl, came over to spend the weekend with us in Arlington one time. And after she left, my kids looked at me and said, "Mom, are we poor?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, Sharon said we're poor." And when we said we're not, she said, "Well, y'all don't have any food." And they said, "We have top Roman. We have seashell noodles. We have peanut butter and jelly."
That's right. And we have each other. And there's something to be said about that love. It may be peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with a lot of peace and a lot of love means a whole lot more than a filet mignon and a baked potato when you're afraid to take a bite because you don't know if a hand's going to come across the table and knock it out of your mouth.
Exactly.
Definitely. You know, people sometimes can take submission out of context. And Roger, when you hear them talk about wives submitting to husbands, give me some of your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, it's interesting is people tend to pick up that verse, and I think for many years, even in many of the churches, it was more of a masculine-driven perspective of, gee, the wife should be at home and be silent. But when you actually look at Scripture, it says, "Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church." That's the piece they miss. Well, how did he love the church? Well, he suffered and died quietly on a cross, a horrible death for us. And so I think the simple guidance that so many miss here is what the Bible is telling men is, give yourself, put yourself out in front. Don't be afraid to basically take a bullet, figuratively or literally, for your wife. They're precious and they should be cared for. And I think we live in an environment now where I think women's rights, quite honestly, it has its positives, but on the negatives, people begin to think that I don't. We're equals. Well, we're equals, but God said she's in your charge. Care for her. He didn't say you control her, that you put her in a box. He said love her, and that means in every respect. And I think we all struggle with that because we're human and we fail. But I think that's certainly the most important message in a relationship.
Right. And it's a mutual submission because within the context of Scripture, it also tells the husbands to submit to their wives. And it's not about power and control. It's about love. That's what the marriage union is about. It's about choosing a lifestyle of sacrificial love, one for another. Christian submission is not slavery. And it seems like people tend to view it that way. You're going to do what I said because I said it, how I said it, when I say to do it, because I own you. No, that is not submission. And
well,
Go ahead.
I was going to comment, Wendy, if you don't mind, and that is that what we're taught about marriage is the two become one.
Mm-hmm.
So do most people beat themselves up?
That's right.
No,
No.
right? So
No.
so the two become one. So begin to you make yourself better because of her. She makes herself better because of you. And I think those things you begin to you concern with who you are, how you act, because it reflects on her. You really you care. You're bonded together. You enjoy spending time together. So.
Sure. One other thing that tends to keep people in these relationships is they're concerned about their image. They're afraid of how they're going to look and what will people say. And I think especially with social media now, so many people are quick to comment and air out their opinions about anyone's life, good, bad, or anything in between, but they become afraid of their image and they begin to worry about what people will say. Do you know the truth is that people will criticize you no matter what you do? You don't have to be divorced or married to go through criticism. No, people will criticize you if they want to criticize you because it's reflective of who they are and what's in their heart. If they are a critical person, they're going to be critical no matter what. Don't let their critical spirit keep you from enjoying a life of peace and security, because as quickly as someone can condemn you, 10 other people could rise up and encourage you and bless you for having the faith and the courage to step out to get help. It's important to get help. It's not enough just to leave the situation. We need good counselors. We need good friends. We need to surround ourselves with people who can help us reacclimate as a single person in society or a single parent in society, those who will come alongside and help take the kids for an evening so that we can have some downtime, or take boys out to go fishing because they need that positive man in their life. I can't say enough about that. And I want to encourage you, if you know someone who is hurting, be a safe place for them. Encourage them. Help them find their way by doing those things, by helping them to pack a bag and keep it hidden for them. Maybe helping them get a ride to open up their own bank account. Different things like that. It all makes a difference. Diane?
Yes, it does. It makes all the difference in the world knowing someone's there to take your back and help you out. And like you said, even if it's one night, to care for the children so you can just have a little downtime.
Mm-hmm. It matters. It really does. And if you think, well, my church will not accept this, honey, move churches. You don't have to stay there. If you think that they're not going to accept it or you can't face seeing them, well, move. You don't owe it. You don't owe all of your happiness to them. Get up and move churches and go to a place.
Right, you only owe it to one person, and that's the good Lord.
Mm-hmm. Go to a place where you can reestablish yourself and help the kids to become acclimated to a new lifestyle. Diane, a lot of times people think I can change my husband or my wife that's abusing me or abusing the children. What do you say to that?
In my case, you sure could not.
No.
I am not a psychologist, but I don't think a leopard changes their spots. The good Lord can do it for them if they're willing to change. Mm-hmm. But I know I've talked to people that the same man got married several times or dated whatever, and he did the same thing to all of them. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I don't think they stop. Like I said, you can if you want to, and the good Lord helps you. But the majority don't change.
Right. And we can't change anyone, and we are not responsible for someone else's behavior. We are only responsible for ourselves and our behavior. To think that if you stay and you love them enough that they're going to change is a mistake. That is not how people change. Oftentimes, violence must be interrupted. Abuse must be interrupted. Good boundaries need to be drawn. If you reconcile with a person after a time of separation is absolutely okay, but I wouldn't encourage getting back together with a person unless they have had a significant amount of help, and you have too, so that you can re-engage in a healthier dynamic within the marriage or dating relationship, family dynamics. Because the truth is this can be widespread. You can be an adult woman and have an abusive set of parents and feel like you owe it to them to remain in close fellowship with them, even though they may be abusive. And even adult children can be hit by adult parents, and that is absolutely not okay. Being embarrassed over the stigma that may come from separating is only for a little while, because the truth is that you will have every opportunity to rebuild yourself, to rebuild your name, and to walk in the fullness of all that Christ has for you. You know, a long time ago, there was this lady, and she hosts this show now by the name of Miss Wendy, and she was a very young bride, and at 21 years old, she had a husband that she was married to that was Christian, and they thought that they were doing things right. She thought she was doing things right. And one time he told her in an argument, the next time we go to church or we go somewhere, just don't talk. Let me do all of the talking for you. And I thought it was out of love, because he knew more Bible. He was more polished. He could speak better than I could. Until later, he told me, the reason that I told you that is because every time you talk, you sound like you came from the damn ghetto. And bit by bit, over the next 20 years, I became more and more and more quiet and began to doubt who I was. I love the Lord. I still studied my Bible, took care of my children, took care of my home, but really lost that sense of who I was. And it's amazing to me to see how God changes things. And that is the business that He's in. He is our Redeemer, not the once upon a time, the everyday Redeemer, the forever will be Redeemer, to redeem my voice, because here I talk to people, hundreds of thousands every single day around the world. And I think God had a different message about my voice. And as I began to turn to Him and He began to deposit His truths in me in a different way, and I was able to separate myself from that situation, it's been profound to see how God redeems and how He restores, and how He's able to use the very bad things in life to accomplish very good things in life on the earth. Diane and Roger, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. You know that I love what you do. I love how you take a stand and you help people. You don't just talk about it, but you put your hands in the soil of their life and you help them. Again, I want you to know that Diane and Roger are there to help you. You can visit them at the Society of Women Who Love Shoes.org. And reach out to them. They will offer you some valuable tools. Reach out to me. Let me know how the show has impacted you. Visit me at Refreshing Times Counseling Center. Know that I also have an associate. He is gentle. He is kind. He loves the Lord. And he is also available if you are a man and you feel like you would feel more comfortable talking these things through with a man, because a woman in your life has abused you, you can come to us. There is a safe place for healing at Refreshing Times Counseling Center. Visit me at refreshingtimescounselingcenter.com. That's refreshingtimescounselingcenter.com. It's been a joy spending time with you today on Matters of the Heart Radio Live. Tune in next week as we talk about the matters that are on your heart.